Welcome to another episode of the Virginia Investor Podcast. Today's guest is Jimmie Darden, a Virginia-based real estate investor, landlord, and entrepreneur whose journey into real estate was shaped by an early entrepreneurial influence from his grandfather. And he's been investing in real estate for about a decade now. He's done rentals, flips, wholesaling, short-term and mid-term, and I look forward to getting into all of it and learning more about you and your background. Jimmie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Stephen. I appreciate it.
I'm fired up, man. Let's start where we always do. I want to learn more about your childhood, your upbringing. Where were you born?
Yeah, so I was born in Richmond, Virginia,
Awesome.
South side of Richmond. Came up with my mom, did some time out there. And honestly, it was a journey that took me to Powhatan, ultimately, and kind of grew up there, kind of jumped around between my grandparents and my parents, biological parents. Basically Richmond, Chesterfield area. I've always been kind of a local to that area.
Do you have any siblings?
I do, yeah. I've got a multitude of siblings. I've got brothers and sisters kind of scattered all over the place. In different places throughout the state.
Growing up, did you play any sports or anything like that?
So I didn't play any sports initially growing up until I got into high school, where I played football for a short while.
Got it.
I had an injury there, and that was the end of my football
Yeah,
career.
that was a short-lived career.
Very short-lived career in football, yeah.
Would you say you were focused on like academics growing up, like had some real big pursuit of like getting good grades and what you wanted to do after school, or were you just being a kid, like having fun, hanging out with your friends, stuff like that?
Having fun. Having fun, man. So my transition from Richmond to the country, like from the city to country, was pretty polar for me. So my childhood had a lot of different kids, kind of circulating around. But yeah, always been, just being a kid.
How old were you when you went out to Powhatan?
So I was in sixth grade when I went out to Powhatan. So my middle school career started out in Powhatan and kind of went through high school, graduated high school in Powhatan as well.
That's a tough age to transition to.
Yes, it was.
What was the difference in life when you were in the city versus Powhatan? Like, did you have to change up a lot, or did you just learn a lot new things about yourself?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So, growing up, I think as a kid, it was like I was in the city. So, this kind of tough attitude. You had to get this persona you had to put on. It was a pretty rough neighborhood around Midlothian Village. So moving from like that city kind of crime-riddled area to like, country slowed down, you got chickens and cows
Right.
and things like that. I was pretty polar. So when I made the transition, like in the sixth grade, I can remember like automatically having like static with like younger guys,
Right.
you know what I mean? Just trying to assert myself and find myself. So there's a lot of just exploratory things, I think, going from that transition from Richmond to Powhatan.
Did you learn, like, eventually that you didn't really have to do that? Like, far less of a transition of what you're talking about, but like from my middle school, I was basically in like a Richmond City school. It wasn't technically Richmond City, but it was like I could walk to the border of the city.
Right.
Like Richmond City school, public school, very different environment.
Exactly.
So I had to act a certain kind of way to get in and make sure I was like in with like the right crowd
Absolutely.
and safe and everything. And then when I went to high school, I remember showing up the same.
Yep.
As I left middle school.
Yep.
And when I showed up to high school, I like on day 2, I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
this is wildly different.
Yeah.
And I like started like I could just act different, dress different, be different.
Yep.
Like didn't have to like show like have this big guard up or defensive or anything like that.
Exactly.
And then I learned like I could just be a different person after that. Like I didn't need to be a certain type of way. Was it the same for you?
It was the exact same, yeah. And I feel like the initial transition from like, I would say sixth grade, eighth grade, it was that, hey, I got to put up this guard. And then in high school, like you said, like it almost felt like, oh, I can let my guard down. I can be who I am. So, I mean, like I said, I started dressing different,
Right.
kind of even
Yeah.
talking different. And like you find your crew, you find your circle, you let your guard down, your style changes,
Yeah.
everything changes. So I definitely got more comfortable, I think, from like that middle school to high school transition,
Right.
kind of settled in, found myself a little bit more, and just, it took a while to let that guard down, but you're absolutely right.
Right.
That happened for sure.
Did you have any professional ambition in high school? Like, some kids just know what they want to do, or at least know exactly what college they want to go to or what they want to do after high school. What was going through your head?
Yeah. So I was always interested in computers and things early on. My grandfather, like being an entrepreneur, which we'll get into, he always had access to like, stuff that most kids don't have access to. Just in his business, there was a lot of bartering going on. So he would come home with like a laptop or a computer, and like it was unheard of at that time, like have like a computer. Like they were thick and huge.
Right.
But like I started tinkering around with that. So by the time I got to high school, I had just an affinity for like electronics and computers. So I took some computer courses in high school, and I was like, maybe I could do this.
Yeah.
So initially, right after high school, it was like I seeked out like a technical school, and that kind of began my transition into technology, which we'll get into too.
What did your grandfather do?
So he was a small engine repair by trade, and so he always was tinkering. He opened up a shop actually on Jeff Davis. It's no longer there, but for about 40 years it was there on Jeff Davis. And I just remember the big sign saying Darden Small Engine Repair.
Awesome.
I would go with him to work in the mornings, and then I would go to school in Richmond. That was just like my daily routine. So every day, he had a huge shop, little small lot, but like tons of like scrap parts and engines and tools and things. People always in and out. So it was always like I was always exposed by this business, and like I didn't know what he was doing. I know he was making a lot of money,
right? Because
there wasn't any small engine repairs like for miles. You know what I mean? It wasn't a common thing in the city. So that's kind of where I got my exposure to like business and his legacy.
What did you learn from that? Like, what memories do you have specifically of entrepreneurship at a very young age? Like, what were you exposed to that you can remember?
Yeah, so I think it was just the fact that he made his own schedule, and I was under his wing. I didn't know why he was doing that. And I was like, why aren't you going to work like my grandma or mom, like doing a day job? It was just him in his truck, and he would take me there every day. And I can just remember that, people were coming, they were paying him good money to do services.
Right.
He would work with his hands. So I just remember just looking over his shoulders and being like, I don't know how you're doing that, but it's like they bring it in, it's got a problem, it's got it's smoking or something. And he just starts tinkering like, while he's drinking a beer or something. Right. And it was just like, wow, this is something that could be kind of cool, right? It was just uncommon for me at that age because everybody else that I was exposed to was, hey, I'm going to work. I'll see you back at like 5 o'clock. Well, it was my grandfather. I was going with him, seeing the things that he was doing for work. It was very grossly different from everything else I was exposed to.
And that's your elementary age.
Yeah,
like that's young, right? And so did that influence you entrepreneurially later on, like in high school, were you cutting grass and stuff 100%. Like that, or were you coming up with your own gigs?
Yeah, 100%. Because, in the country, one of the bigger changes was that, I had chores, right? Like, and in the city, like we live in an apartment building. I didn't have to cut grass. I didn't have to chop wood. Growing up in Powhatan and being exposed to them, like they gave me chores. I had to cut grass. I had to cut the wood. I had to go with my grandfather, help him out at the business. So it definitely shaped like my view of things and how I like approached life. But definitely like growing up, I ended up starting a landscaping business later on.
Oh, you did?
In high school.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I actually did that for a while, and I think that was in my teens. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I did that off and on. And then I actually did that before my first daughter was born in 2014. I started like a full-fledged landscaping company, and a lot of those small, I would say, mini quests in entrepreneurship were shaped by the fact that hey, I want to put my name on something.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So
when you were starting these businesses, as a kid, you're learning and you're kind of starting these little ventures and making some money. Was it just to make money, or did you have any idea of actual investing in finances?
Yeah, no idea about investing in finances. I was always savvy with saving money. I just remember my grandpa, like his mindset was like, I don't want banks to have my money, right? So he would just have like, just loads of cash stocked away, and like, he would show me like, hey, I'm storing this, I'm saving this for a rainy day. And of course, rainy days never came, but he just had this, this affinity for saving money. So I was always like, all right, well, I need money to survive. So that was, a motivator. But I was always kind of financially sharp. Like, I want to grow this money. I don't want to just have it in a box.
Right.
I want to, how can I figure out how to grow this? So as I started like these little mini quests, like money wasn't the ultimate goal for me. That was part of the equation. It was cool to have money, as a young guy.
Right.
But at the same time, it was like, I could build this into something. Maybe I could start a company.
Interesting.
And that was kind of like, fueled by the fact that he had a company of his own as well.
Cool. Did you do well in high school? Like, were you tuned in on grades and stuff like that?
So I would say in the middle of the road, for sure. I definitely struggled with just kind of just locking in on some of the content that wasn't interesting to me, which still kind of holds true to my life now.
For sure.
Like, we can just lock in on stuff that we're super interested in, but like everything else, you're like, I can put that off for a while. But I did finish with pretty good grades. I would say B's and A's, maybe a C in there. I didn't knock it out of the park, do honor roll or anything like all the time, but I think I did fairly well.
Cool. So you graduate high school, you decide you want to go to a technical school, get your hands on some computers or technology in some sense, and do that work. Were you thinking of like maybe eventually starting your own company or just going to that corporate world type field? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, it was definitely more the corporate world thing, and basically that started the my journey with several like contracts and smaller IT gigs. after, I did all the, I worked at McDonald's when I was 14, worked at Best Buy, kind of like getting mild exposure to things like that. But it definitely started like in the corporate America was kind of my goal. Like I want to get a W-2, I want to get, good paying job, white collar job, and just, keep growing from there.
And that's what you were taught growing up, I assume, right? Like
exactly.
me and you both, right?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Get through school, either go to college or don't, but like get through school and then find a corporate job and then just work it.
Exactly.
Right?
That was it. That was what was kind of beat into our heads. In the back of my mind, I was like, yeah, I want to start a business, but like realistically, as you get older and you become a teenager, you're like, I probably am going to need a day job to kind of get through all this, pay the bills, and then figure out the rest from there. So it kind of was always like, all right, the goal is get the W-2, get the corporate job, rise up the ladder, make a lot of money, and then maybe after that you get settled, you could use that money to do something else.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, like a lot of times I think on investor platforms you hear like W-2 is like the devil. There's so much good that comes with the W-2 as well.
Yep.
Especially if you enjoy what you do and you're getting paid well, like you're highly bankable.
Exactly.
There's a consistent paycheck that comes in, and like as long as you're making moves on the side to protect yourself and your family and like growing a there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely not. Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. And I think at some point I had a mental shift where it was like, okay, this can be the end game or this can be a tool in my tool belt, right?
Yeah.
So there was a time where I wasn't working a W-2. Like I kind of took a gap, for personal reasons. And with that gap, I saw kind of the challenges surrounding not having that stable income, especially with the fluctuation of business and the volatility of all that. So I learned to use it as a tool more than like an end game, but it can be both. It can be on parallel, and it can go in the same line as your entrepreneurial journey.
Right, and there's pros and cons of both. It just depends on what works for whoever's doing it.
Exactly right.
All right, so you go to technical school. What happens after that? You get a job in that field?
Yeah, so I went to technical school. Right after that, I ended up getting a contract job with like Capital One, I think it was, and it was just like a very basic desktop support role. And I just learned a lot, applying a lot of the skills that I learned just from like self-teaching and like high school and all that stuff, and just tinkering. I was always a tinker. I was like building PCs and things like that. So it fell right in line with what I was doing anyway. So that kind of started the course of like, all right, so I started working this contract job and worked there for a while, and then ended up getting another IT job. Just kind of went from there, just kind of
building it up
the ladder. Yep.
Sweet. Do you still have that same passion for it that you thought you would have?
So yes and no. My journey in IT and technology kind of ventured off from like hardware to like software. So my passion really kind of boiled down to like, how can I help people? So ultimately, the jobs that I had that gave me the most fulfillment were ones where it was like, all right, so I'm building something or a product or something that's going to help somebody. So like my first major technology job, I don't want to skip ahead too much, but it was related to health, like medical management. So we were building software that was like, helping nurses engage with people that had like medical illnesses. And I was like, well, if we change this, it can help more people because they're more aware about like their medical stuff and their history and like their illnesses, and it's giving them the ability to just like, advocate for themselves. Like, so it was always, I didn't really find that theme until later in life to like, what do I actually want to do in technology? But every single role that I've had that like felt good and organic to me were ones where I felt like I was helping somebody.
That's awesome.
Either directly or indirectly, right? Because it's not like I was going to their house and saying, hey, I'm going to give you a system that's going to fix you. It's like I'm supporting a system that's going to help somebody else help you indirectly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that says a lot about like you and the people in your network, like that I know a handful of them pretty well, is like just that mindset of like, if we can help, the more people we can help, the better off. We're not looking at it as the better off we're going to be, but like we look at who we can help first.
Exactly.
And then naturally the group becomes pretty successful
100%.
Because it's like, we're just trying to help other people is all we're trying to do.
That's it.
In my career, like I had spent a ton of time just solely focused on helping other people and making an impact. And when I got to real estate, I actually struggled with that the first year or so in property management, because I was like, okay, I'm helping people, but I'm helping investors make more money. And I didn't connect the dots that early. I was still I was brand new to the industry. I was still learning. I didn't even know like real estate investing existed at this time. I was I was trying to find the fulfillment in it when I finally connected the dots and realized that now we have this mission of basically changing the industry as a whole on a national level for how local property managers operate.
Right.
And if we can provide a better experience to the residents, and through that experience, the landlords get a higher return, which I believe is fully possible. I'm not going to go down that whole tangent, but like the better experience that we provide, the better return that landlord's going to get. And then we're going to greatly impact the resident experience, the whole rental experience of what's possible. And then also the returns of the investor. And it's like we could impact thousands of lives through that.
Yep.
And so then I was like, okay, found my mission.
Yep, got it.
I'm good to go.
It clicked.
But that mission means a lot. Like I think for people like us, like it's important that our work is important to us. Like we don't just want to clock in, do the work, and then clock out, and then go find whatever our mission is after that.
Right.
But what rough time frame did you enter the workforce? Like, did you get out of the technical school and enter the workforce?
I would say roughly. I had some stints before that because I was like Lowe's, Home Depot. I had like a bunch of little jobs before I really got to tech. But I would say like roughly 2000 and I think it was 2007.
Okay.
I believe, yeah, around 2007. I graduated 2003 from high school. And 2007 is when I really busted into the industry. Like,
awesome.
It was like a help desk job, and like I had a big opportunity. Interviewed with like 212 people, and I just remember my first boss. Like his name was Frank, and I felt like I was like, "There's no way I'm getting this shot." Like, had a panel interview. There was like multiple interviews. It was like, no way. I wasn't the most qualified guy. I had like an associate's degree from a tech school that's probably now defunct. I'm not even sure. But like I was like, man, if I got this opportunity, like for one, it's a considerable salary for at the time. But for two, it was like, man, this means that I was chosen out of like all these people, like for what I know, what I bring to the table. So even I felt like I was a relatively smart guy, but I still felt like I wasn't very confident at that time. I never really had that type of opportunity. It was always like I said, Home Depot, Lowe's, contract jobs, things like that. So basically when I got into that role and, kind of started that help desk type of thing and getting in IT, it gave me a lot of exposure to a lot of opportunities and it really just changed everything from there. Really.
Yeah, it sounds like it gave you some confidence.
It really did. Yeah. It gave me a big confidence boost. He believed in me. We're still friends to this day. Talk to him all the time. He's a great guy, and I always thank him for just like, hey, you opened that door for me and gave me that opportunity. Saw it when nobody else did. So.
That's cool, and it sounds like he hired you for you.
Yeah,
not like there might have been some other candidates with more experience,
exactly,
or, better degrees or whatever. But like, I'm a firm believer in like hire the person.
That's right.
Like,
because we were just talking about that earlier. Like you can invest in that person and be like, hey, you may not have everything right now, but you can learn. Everybody can learn. Everybody has the capacity to learn and do better. So if you invest in the person and they show you, hey, look, you gave me a chance. Here I am. Like I'm up here. I'm big dog now. So that really can it helps everybody.
So if you got started in that kind of that corporate career around 2007, you probably weren't as impacted by the financial crisis, meaning like you were already hired.
Yep.
As long as you didn't get laid off in like 2008 to 2010, you might have been in good shape.
Yeah.
Was that kind of the case? Like you were able to kind of get through it?
That was definitely the case. And definitely back then there wasn't as much of like outsourcing where you see and and job cuts. So I was very fortunate to have a strong run with the same company for like 16 years.
Awesome.
And I, kind of grew in different roles, but like I was very much shielded, I think, from like all the, the shifts in the industry during that time because it was a very stable gig. It was a very stable company. They were making money. And it was just like, I didn't feel a lot of that. It was never, terminated or anything like that. So
solid.
It was a strong run.
At some point, were you looking at investments and finances and trying to get more savvy there now that you're kind of settled in your career? Or was there some other like divine intervention that brought that into your life? Yeah,
so it was kind of a blend of all those things. So my first like experience or like exposure to investment was like my 401k through my company. And like I didn't know anything other than, hey, you should probably put, X amount of percent of your check because they're giving you free money. Right. So I found that I had some pretty sharp friends. They're like, hey man, just take the company match. They're giving you free money. I didn't know
for sure.
Yeah. So I just started blindly just putting some of my money in there because I didn't have any bills. I was a young guy. So like from the time I was like 21 until now, obviously, like I've always contributed to a 401k and taken money whenever I could from a company. And of course, I saw like the effects of compound interest, and I learned more about it. And even though I was really kind of scared of like investing like individually in the stocks, I knew my company was doing well, so I bought company shares. Right. And then I just watched my 401k grow like exponentially over years, and I was like, man, this is mind blowing. Like, how can I replicate this in other venues, right? So I think that just kind of planted the seed for me wanting to invest, and I didn't know how that looked. But yeah, organically over time, I think there were shows that were coming out like HGTV, flip shows and all this stuff. And it was always kind of a pipe dream. Never thought about it, never owned property until my first property with my wife. Of course, watching, where we purchased that and then kind of seeing the equity grow over years, like the tax assessment going up, it just started getting the wheels turning. So I was like, how can I double down on this? Like, I don't want to work for a company forever. And one of the things that always kind of was on my back was always thinking about my grandpa. I was like, I want a legacy. I don't want to just work for a company because I worked so hard to get this job. But then I also realized that I could just lose this job and then I have nothing, right, to show for it other than my 401k. So I was like, I don't want that. And then obviously when I got into a relationship and started thinking about like building a family and legacy and things, so all these things just kind of connected together divinely. And I was like, all right, real estate. Let me look into that, right? Like we got a house, let's start thinking about it. So I was just saving. I was always good at saving money. So it was just kind of part of my plan. Like at some point, I'm going to get into real estate. I talked to my wife about it. My wife now, she's my girlfriend at the time. And I was like, I'm going to do this. I don't know what that looks like. So I just started going crazy and going down the rabbit hole of YouTube and reading books, all the good books. And at some point, everything just came to a head. And we will get into that too, but I started like getting into learning like wholesaling.
Right.
And, ultimately some of those first deals lended themselves to, what I've got now.
What did your girlfriend at the time, your wife now, what did she think when you said, I want to start investing in real estate? Like, do you remember a specific response or mindset that she had?
It was all supportive.
Awesome.
It was always like, yeah, go for it. Cause she was with me when, when I started, all these multiple random businesses. So she kind of knew I was kind of flighty with like, hey, sweet, with the random ambitions and she knows that I kind of like go all in and I invest myself. So she's like, do your thing.
Dude,
right?
That's so powerful to like not change up on your spouse. Yep. I mean, if you have to, like, hopefully you both can get on board,
exactly,
because you might be changing up for the better, like doing something different that really improves both of you from where you were.
Right. Exactly right.
But you're still changing up, and that person may not really agree with that or want to take the risk. But like, if your wife, again, girlfriend at the time, like was used to you doing some crazy stuff and taking some risk and like being overly ambitious about things, like when you go to do this, they're going to be like, all right.
Right. That's exactly
and they're on
right.
board, right?
They trust you. And I know you have the same blessing. And it's like, it may not make sense, right now. I'm happy to have the conversation. So it was never like without some sort of like, let's talk about this first.
Yeah.
But it was always like she knew it was coming from a place of like, I'm going to go in on this. I'm going to make calculated risks. But we're going to talk about it. We're going to be comfortable with the decision, whatever it is. But she's always been supportive in that way. Yeah. And like, there's never been a time where I felt like you really think this is a bad idea or that I'm not capable of it.
Yeah.
So fortunately for me, on most of the things that I've attempted, I'm putting in the work to get to where we need to get, and I'm not quitting until it's done. But also that there is the risk that it could fail.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been some failures. So like, even when there's failures and you have to restart, I think the support of having a partner is like, I know that you're in this and like, and they'll check you, right? They'll hold you accountable. Sure. Like, are you doing everything that you're supposed to do? Yeah. If you say yes, great. If not, then let's figure out a solution. So I think that's the difference maker, is having that support.
That's a great partner to have.
Yep.
Because I've seen a handful of people, unfortunately, where either the husband or the wife, super intelligent, head on their shoulders, know exactly what they need to do and what they can do and what they're capable of, but the opposite party is just won't allow them to take the risk. They don't support them. They don't encourage them.
They don't believe.
They don't believe in the partner's ability to do that. And like, it's so sad to see.
It is sad. And it creates a lot of friction internally. Like, for your confidence standpoint, like if you don't have to support your partner, like it's like, even if it's like outlandish and you just have an idea and they shoot it down, it's like it can plant a seed that's just really hard to like grow out of. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Well, good for you. I'm glad that you were able to obviously find someone that has your back and supports you and believes in you and stuff. That's incredible.
For sure.
So you mentioned you were reading books. You were, I don't know, listening to podcasts at the time.
Yeah,
like, did you get in like Bigger Pockets?
Yeah, I got into Bigger Pockets. Bigger Pockets was actually one of the first ones that I saw, and got to give a shout out to Eric Hunter, man, because he's one of the first guys like in real estate that's still actively in real estate that I found. And he had like the avatar on Bigger Pockets. And it was very much a forum where you go and ask a question and you wait for a reply. So he was one of the first guys that engaged with me on that platform when I was learning. And it was just me just being thirsty for knowledge, just searching for stuff. Hey, what's a good book that I should read? And all the Think and Grow Rich, all the Rich Dad, Poor Dads, all those books came up. And it was just like, all right, I wasn't a big reader, but I did the audio books at the time, and I did some of the podcasts. And obviously I just kind of correlated that with like stuff on YouTube. So everything that I learned was just, free exposure to stuff, maybe bought a couple of books. it was just widely available. And I was just so blown away that like this is all actionable information if you apply it.
Right.
I think where real estate is so different from a lot of industries is that everything that you could pay for, like mentorship, is available for free.
Yeah.
I think the trick is like, culminating and acting on it and finding networks of people, right, that we all know that can support you in those ambitions. So it's like, it's all out there for the taking if you know how to apply it and you take your time to figure out what works for you.
100%.
Yep.
Did you start to build your network at this time, or were you kind of still holding to yourself a little bit?
So kind of a little bit. I started kind of expanding there, and I kind of took the bigger pockets, stuff that I learned to like start on Facebook. And Facebook actually still a big part of our business and just exposure. And we're doing less of the, I would say less, marketing and things like that on Facebook, but it really started me reaching out to people that I wanted to add value to. And one of the things that I learned early on was leading with value. And I still live by that principle. So every time I reached out to somebody, it was literally, how can I help you? Mm-hmm. And that's actually started my first partnership in my first JV deal on a wholesale. Was like, hey, I see you guys are posting, houses, contracts. I've been learning about wholesale and contracts. How can I help you? Right? And so that really started the theme and the trend. And every time I led with that, something good happened. But fast forward to that partnership, it was actually a three-way through a JV deal, and it was actually a triplex in Richmond somewhere. And we ended up, it was like the craziest title search. It was crazy. Like this was mind blowing to me because like title searches, like what is this? Like what are all these things? All these hoops and all these battles and like liens and all these things. So I learned just so much just in that partnership, just like conversating with the attorneys and working with the other wholesalers. But I learned a ton from them. I still kind of talk to them from time to time. But like just being a part of that experience and getting to the closing table, which was like probably like it was like a 45-day long stretch of time. But by the end of it, I ended up stroking and getting a check for like $8 or $9 as my part of the three-way deal. But what I learned from there was just so much more valuable than the money. But it just showed me the power of just partnerships and networking and just leading with value. And I was like, how can I help you? What do you want me to do? So I was running, errands. I was like calling attorneys and like working with the buyer, meeting them on site, doing all these things to add value. But in that, like I was able to just like learn so much, and it still carries with me today.
That's awesome. Was that your first deal?
That was my first deal.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So your first deal was like a three-way partnership on a triplex?
On a triplex,
yeah. So you had that in Richmond, and then it was a wholesale. So you ended up wholesaling it, and you got roughly $8,000 from that after the split, the three-way split. Just very generally speaking, how do you break out a three-way partnership? Like, did one person find the deal, one person like have the relationships or find the buyer, and you did a lot of legwork? Like, how did that pan out?
Yeah. So funny story. So two of the partners were a couple.
Okay.
So they were like, they're like, all right, this is our third, right? We're good with that. And the other person kind of got a lesser split because they were like, I'm not sure their involvement, but it was an interesting dynamic between those three people. But essentially it was like four people. It was like, that was like 1/3. Then there was another person, and it was me. So that was like I was the third. So of course I got my healthy one. Yeah. But they had their third. They split between them or whatever. It was their household. I think they brought the deal, and then I managed basically everything else.
Got it.
Like the communication, coordination, pictures, getting all the things, like just doing anything they needed. And so I thought it was generous, that I got the third I got, but I worked my butt off for it for sure. But it was just me being thirsty for knowledge. How can I help you guys? How can I make it easier for you guys to transact so that it's basically autopilot? Because you guys bought the deal. And I found pretty early on that one of my skill set was like negotiation. So I ended up being a part of the negotiation. I negotiated with the seller and with the buyer, and ended up basically getting the buyer to come up higher on their price after just saying, hey, look, there's a big value add here. And I think part of their weakness and where they lacked was like, just framing the deal in a way that's like, how do we make this appetizing? How do we do the value add? How do we really value this? They actually priced that triplex like super low. And me at the time, like I was a numbers guy, I understand data, and I was like, we could probably get this for it, right? So my extra money came from was like, instead of advertising for this, let me see if I can find you a buyer. Let's see if I can find a better buyer at a better price. So their first buyer fell out, and that's kind of how I came into the picture, right? So I was like, okay, look, this deal can be saved. Let me see if I can reach out on Facebook, try to find someone. So I ended up finding this buyer and negotiating a higher price. So I brought them back. I was like, look, we should go with this person. I vetted them out. I didn't know what a proof of funds was at the time. And I was like, they just showed me like a screenshot of money in their account. So I think they're good, right? So it was a lot of guessing, but ultimately it ended up, they were a legit buyer. I can't even remember if they're still out there. I'm sure they are. But they were like, yeah, that's a sweet deal. And the trip, they got it for like $60,000 or something like that for a triplex in Richmond. Didn't need much work, but those deals don't exist anymore, right? So that was it. I negotiated higher money, got a better buyer, and negotiated all the details, got the contract, and then we just split it from there. So they were happy because they got more money each. And I was happy because I'm like, it's just me getting my first wholesale deal, and this is awesome.
And no money into it.
No money at all.
No money out of pocket
for you. Literally just driving and taking pictures, and like I had to do nothing other than that.
Great example of like, if you don't have any money, how can you get into real estate investing? Again, like I asked, no money in the deal. You might have some of your own personal capital saved up at this point, right? But like that is just a great example of if you didn't have capital, how do you get into it? You offer value and you put in the work, and then you wholesale something, right, with a partnership or something, and then you get a check for $8,000, and then boom, you got a little bit of capital. Do that a couple of times.
That's it.
And then you start to capitalize enough to maybe get your first rental or something through a BRRRR strategy or whatever other strategy, another partnership or something where you don't need more money. That's pretty cool. And you said you had met those partners on like Facebook. Like, is that how you built that relationship?
Yeah, it was all through Facebook. We started on Facebook, kind of communicated. Awesome. You send friend requests. We started with messages, and then we started getting in on the phone calls, having like conference calls, and just hearing them talk about things. I was just learning a lot, and they were I think they were relatively new in the game too. You know, I would say relatively like 2 or 3 years deep, but like I was just learning so much from them, and like some of their mistakes, some of the things that I think they could improve, and some of the things that they were like really good at. Right. So it's like I learned all of that. That's awesome. So I just like sat there quiet and like, how can I help you guys? Yep. How can I figure out like how to be a part of this team? So that kind of grew organically, and eventually kind of went different ways. But like we always kept in touch. Like, this is how we started. That's cool. They invested in me.
It's cool. So a lot of people pay $100,000 to go to college, and you just got paid $8,000 to go to school.
Just to go to school for like 45 days. And I was like, this is a pretty good day.
That's pretty cool. Before I lose the question, what makes you good at negotiation? Why is that a skill that you have?
So that is hard to answer, but I would say I think it's about understanding like the problem to solve, right? So for me, it always starts with, what's the problem at hand? What's going to make you happy at the end of this conversation? And negotiation, I feel like it shouldn't really be a power struggle. It should be, how do we both win from this interaction? So I always focus on the problem, and I always started with like, how can I help you, right? So I came from a customer service background. I came from a Southern home where, you say your pleases and thank you, yes ma'am, no ma'am. So like always just leading with courtesy, leading with kindness. And it just kind of just lended itself to like, all right, you got a problem that needs to be solved. Yeah. I want to help you with that problem. So at the end of the day, numbers and all that stuff be damned. It's like, how can I just lock in on that problem, make you happy, and make you want to work with me, right? And it's never like, I think in real estate, when we start off, it's like, our mentality is like, how do I please this person? But it's like, you can please them just by solving their problem, right? And understanding that. And a lot of people just jump in and like, hey, I want your house for $80,000. But like, is $80,000 going to solve your problem? Because I've bought houses where I didn't pay any money, and it's because I didn't lead with the money. I could say, hey, I'm gonna give you $100,000. I've gotten houses for like $2,000 or $3,000 just because I understood their problem. My problem is I don't want to deal with this tenant anymore. I don't want to deal with this tax situation. I just want it off my plate. And by leading with that, I saved myself, $98,000 by buying a house for $2,000, right? So there's ways that you can approach that problem and help them. That doesn't necessarily mean like there has to be like a money exchange or like a power struggle of like, let's just look at the numbers and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to approach it. That's a great perspective. And a lot of people would think that they need to like own the conversation and like, control everything. What I hear from that is like, you can listen really well and you understand really well. Like,
for sure.
There's a difference of like, everyone's probably heard some saying, or there's probably some like famous quote or whatever, but basically you can hear what people are saying, or you can listen and understand what people are saying. And like when you hear people talk, you're already thinking about your next move, your
That's
next
right.
number, your lowest, your minimum or maximum allowable offer or whatever.
Exactly.
You know, you have all these numbers in your head and you're just waiting till they're done talking. But you're like, no, let's find how we both can win. Like, what do you really need? What's your real situation?
That's
Let's
right.
ask more questions
That's
to really
right.
figure out what's going on. And once you really peel the onion and get to that inner layer of what the problem is, then you know how the numbers fall and what the solution could be. And that's where you need to be. That's
it.
You know, that's where you make your decision from there.
That's it. You nailed it 100%. Yeah, and I think that conversation and listening and just kind of talking through things, it might take a lot more time, right, to understand. And like, I will be the first to admit that I've probably been on like seller calls that like were lasted for like 2 hours that probably could have been wrapped up in 10 minutes.
For sure. Yeah.
But like the net result from that was always greater than I think if I just jump and led with like, hey, I want to get the numbers, because I think one of the repeat themes that I've seen with like working with sellers was like, man, I've just talked to like 20 different people and I chose you because I felt like you heard me.
Right.
And like it took one time to hear that for me to be like, I'm gonna double down on this, right? I'm always going to be the longest talker. And that was, when I in corporate America, one of my things when I was working in customer service was like, I talked for a long time, right? Like we would have long conversations, but they were always happy at the end of the call. And they always felt like I met all their needs. And that process takes time, just like in real estate, just like any business, just like in your business. If it takes me longer to solve your problem, talk through it, I'm willing to make that investment if it means there's a better result in the end and you're happy at it.
Yeah. Instead of saying I'm willing to spend that time, I'm willing to invest in that.
right.
And that's like when we hire new people to our team, we're like, every minute that you spend with this new hire is an investment in the company, and it's an investment in your time of taking roles and responsibilities off your plate.
Yep.
You're not spending your time or doing the. It is an investment in your time.
Yep.
So,
and you're going to get a return on that.
Yeah,
like if
for
you
sure.
spend your time the right way, you're going to get the return every time.
So that's wholesaling. You've got into flips and rentals. One question before you get there. When you started learning about real estate investing, how long was it until your first wholesale deal, roughly?
I would say at least 6 months, probably 6 to 8 months, where I kind of just studied the craft.
That's reasonable, yeah.
Right.
That's a
So
good,
like I got in there, and then like I think probably I would say 6 to 8 month range is when I like connected with those folks and really just took off, kind of learning with them. And then when we got under contract, they brought the contract and we did all the negotiation. So I would say within that 6 to 8 months.
I like that, because a lot of people are like, man, I've been doing this for a month now. I haven't gotten a deal.
Right.
And then, but you also have some people who's like, I've been doing it for 2 years. I just haven't found a good deal yet.
Exactly.
You're like, all right, it should be somewhere in that like 6 to 8 month
Yeah.
range if you're really putting out the effort and going to take
Agreed.
action.
Agreed.
Anything sooner, maybe you get lucky. Anything after that, maybe it's you not taking action. I usually say, like, if you've been really researching, like networking, building relationships, it's been a year, then it's probably, you need to start looking at yourself of like if you're taking the right action and are in the right rooms and stuff like that. But it also, if you find a good deal in the first like 3 months, good for you.
Yeah, you knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing really well.
Yeah. Okay, so you do the wholesale, and then when you're investing, like obviously there's tons of shiny objects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know you want to go the flip route, the wholesale route, or rentals, or are you just kind of like getting the deals and seeing what works for the deal?
Yeah, so I think early on, and that's a great question, early on it was really just like, let's get the deal. Yeah. And I think it was a lot easier than relative to now to like spot a deal, because the numbers were just so grossly different than they are now. So I think initially, and that kind of led to my scaling like pretty quickly, I would say, relative to other people, I guess. But like from what I was hearing, like you're scaling pretty fast, and that was because I was focused on the deal, the numbers, making sure the numbers worked. And it just gave me different avenues of strategies that I want to take. So like if I get this under contract for this, I could wholesale it and make this, or I could use this as a rental if it's a long-term thing, or I could flip it, for this, XYZ. So like I feel like every deal that I focused on at that time, because I was so locked in on numbers and calculations and like making sure that I was, in my mind, buying smart. Even if I wasn't buying it, I was looking at it as a wholesale. I was just looking at it from like the whole playing field.
Right.
I think that was the difference early on. It wasn't so much like a numbers game, like wholesale, how many contracts can I flip? It was like, all right, I have access to literally start 2 or 3 rentals right now and like build my legacy. So do these properties make sense for this, or does it make sense to wholesale and get some quick cash? I didn't need the cash at that moment. So I'm like, I can get this rental, get a good, get a low interest loan, and just start, chipping away at this thing early on. So that was kind of my goal.
And so your goal, like you've mentioned legacy a few times, I would assume your ultimate goal is to build a rental portfolio.
Yes.
And then you flip and you wholesale and do some other stuff, like kind of diversify your streams of income or real estate investing. But the ultimate like bread and butter is getting that real estate or the rental portfolio built. How long was it until you were able to get your first rental?
Yeah. So actually at my first rental, I used kind of the wholesale proceeds. I was probably like a year, I would say, after the wholesale deal was when I got my first, I think it was maybe like 2017 or something, 16 or something like that. It was not too long after the first wholesale deal. I've been saving, I would say, for a little while, maybe a year and a half. And I found an opportunity with the same seller that we're just getting rid of some dilapidated properties in Chesterfield. And it just so happened to come up in conversation, and it was like they kind of knew what I was doing at that time because I was like putting things out there on Facebook that I had my company and I was marketing, and we buy houses, all that good stuff, right? Well, branding is that. So the opportunity came because of my visibility in that space, and it was fairly surprising to some people because they knew I was working in technology. It was like, hey, you're flipping houses now? What's going on?
Yeah.
So just being visible kind of, exposed me to an opportunity where I was able to buy a couple of houses. And fortunately for me, between the wholesale deal and like just some money I'd saved up, I was able to get 2 loans, what ended up being my first flip and my first rental property, which I still own today. So it was excellent because interest rates were crazy good. At the time, I was able to get like a renovation loan on the rental property,
cool. Awesome.
Which was great. That's like not heard of now. But like I was able to work on them both at the same time because I was able to close them at the same time. And so the flip, they were like, okay, cool, this has got plenty of legs. They funded me. I had great credit, all that stuff just lined up. And so I just worked on them with the same team. And ultimately sold the flip, did really well, and the rental property got the renovation done. And it's like I said, I still own that one today. So it's been like 7 or 8 years.
Did the renovation and refi'd out of it?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So since then, you've obviously done, wholesale deals, flips, rentals. As you're building your rental portfolio, it's a lot of rehabs, right? And so what are you learning like in that first rental deal? Like now you're actually doing construction, right? Or you're doing like rehabs, right?
Yeah, major. I haven't done new construction yet. I want to get into that soon. But basically reconstruction is like, in my mind, it's like new construction, essentially.
Yeah.
Spending the same money.
Just completely gutted properties.
Exactly.
Yep. What are you learning about this? Because you haven't done, you worked at Lowe's and Home Depot, so you have some idea of like materials, like in what that is. But like otherwise, how are you learning about, I guess it's the network you're building and the people you have around you and you're asking for help?
100% network. Yeah. Like, I didn't come from like a construction background. So it was literally just, a lot of it was learning from my mistakes. Like, I budgeted it completely wrong on this project. Right. So like I think in my experience, it was always like, the budget was at least 30 to 40 to 50% like light. And so like my first project was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. Whoa, no, help me. Yeah. So like I learned from the contractors, from, other investors, hey, this is how you, properly scope things, be very specific about the line items of, there's this creepy scope stuff that you don't think about, right? Mm-hmm. Like foundation was a big one. I've had stuff where like, we couldn't get access to the foundation, so like you completely miss that you had to replace a whole flooring system, which ends up being 20, 30 grand that you didn't account for in your budget. So, and I'm still learning now, like how to budget right and budget smart. That's something that a lot of people don't admit to, but I've never been like super tight at it, right? So like I always have to second guess, and a lot of times now I'll be like, hey man, what do you think about this budget, right?
Right.
Fortunately, a lot of people have ChatGPT and things like that now. We didn't have that back then. But like I think I've learned just being smarter with your budget, like taking more time working with contractors that know their stuff and can be like, okay, have you thought about this?
Right.
Let's scope this out together. Let's walk the properties. Another thing I didn't do early on was like some of these houses I bought, I didn't sight unseen, right? Yeah. That was a big no-no. Wholesaling, it works okay. But like when you're buying these properties, and that was kind of a mindset shift for me, it was like, okay, I'm not just locking these up anymore. I need to understand, like, if I'm going to buy this and hold this, I need to make sure it's a good product. Right. I need to make sure it's sound, it's safe, because I have people living here. So I had to get really tight with like the numbers, what it's going to take to renovate it, what the materials look like, what the timeline looks like especially. So those kind of few things that I've learned.
What have you learned about vetting contractors?
Oh, man. God, I'm still fighting those battles. But I would say recommendations are great. They're not the end all be all. Right. So like I've been referred contractors that, are kind of fly by night by people that use them and things were fine. But one thing about vetting contractors is that even the best contractors have their faults and their flaws and their shortcomings. And I think one of the bigger challenges that I had early on was not firing quick enough, right?
Yeah,
and like
for sure.
terminating that relationship. Because you want to believe that everybody has, your best interest at heart. But at the end of the day, situations change, dynamic change, like stress is life, things happen. You have to be very present to know if things are starting to go off the track and pivot faster, because at the end of the day, delaying those decisions and moving in a different direction if things aren't going right can ultimately like delay the whole, like derail the whole project and the relationship.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we found that like we have a lot of contractors that we work with at the property management company, and that me as an investor like have a different set of contractors. We found largely that like some contractors have been good since day one. They're still good.
Right.
Most contractors like have their seasons of being good.
Yep.
And I think if they are good, they get so much business and so much referrals that maybe they don't know how to manage their schedules or manage their cash and stuff like that. So then they fall out. Then they might come back on the scene and be like, hey, I'm good again. And like, so like whenever I make a referral, I'm always like, I've had a good experience with this person. I cannot vouch for what they'll do tomorrow.
Same thing. It's like a permanent disclaimer now. And actually, for a while, I went through like a period where people were like, "Hey, man, are you gatekeeping your contractors?" I'm like, "No, I care about you, and I've had a great experience, but I know that can change, and I've been burned so many times that I hesitate to recommend people because I know that those changes, like even with like my closest relationship with like contractors, I know that there's seasonal changes. And no contractor's going to come in the room like, hey, man, I screwed up real bad last year, but I'm back. It's usually like I can get it done because I want to get done. Like they have people they depend on too, that they delegate to. So you don't always know the quality of their subs or like their processes or whatever it is.
I also have contractors that have done a lot of work for us, and I know how they operate, and I know the mistakes that they make, and know how to limit those, like how to work with them, how to limit those mistakes. And I also know that out of every 10 projects, they're going to royally screw up. But the thing is like, I know that. Like I know it's going to happen, but the other 9, they knock it out the park, right? So in that like potential referral, I'm like, I don't know which one you're going to get, but like, but I've already accepted that risk. So I'd rather you not really have to deal with it. So I will give like a strong disclaimer or I'll just refer like someone else who I heard was really good or something. Just say like, I heard this was really good. You can, use them at your own risk.
And that's great that you're like, you're preparing them for that. Like that's all. A lot of people don't do that. They're just like, no, they suck. Or they're just like, yeah, maybe, but they don't tell you why. Like, I think it's important. Like, if you're going to refer somebody to put your stamp of approval on, you got to like, hey, look, I had a good experience with this is what could happen. Maybe have a conversation with them.
I want to always help if possible, and then I tend to over communicate. So like, I always want to try to help versus not help and just say, sorry, I don't know anyone. Like, that makes me feel bad. I do know people, so I would rather say yes and give them people, but then also over communicate a disclaimer and be like, hey, watch out.
That's exactly. I'm the same. So, that's exactly right.
And then it's on them if they need that person bad enough, or if they got another reference from someone else, or like, this person's awesome, there's no disclaimers, then go with that other person.
That's it. I'm glad you do that. It makes me feel better, because I always kind of like hesitate when I do that, and I'm like, am I just giving them too much information? But it's all fair game, right?
For sure.
You're just doing the right thing.
I mean, you could just say no, and that's what they get out of you.
Exactly.
So,
like, all right.
What about lenders? Like, are you using other people's money heavily on these deals that you're either flipping or holding as rentals and refinancing?
Yeah. So 100%. So I think that a good portion of the flips and rentals that I had early on were like more traditional lending products. As I kind of got to scale, it was definitely more private money, other people's money, working with great lenders that that believe in the mission and the vision. So yeah, definitely I would say other people's money has been a huge part of our business model.
How do you vet a lender? Because almost everyone is a private lender.
Yeah, everybody's a private lender. So I am very much skittish of like the Facebook blast lenders that are like, hey, I got money to give. And like, we all are in the same real estate group. So it's like, we kind of tend to know like who the legit players are.
Right.
But then like, there's just some of those folks that are, I don't know if they're robots or like they're affiliated with different, like, or they're like partners with other people. But like, I've had conversations with some of these guys, like just to kind of figure it out. And it always ends up being like, it's almost like an MLM or like some weird schemey thing that just doesn't feel right. But yeah, I think vetting lender it's usually a personal referral, having a conversation. And a lot of times, and some of my private lenders are like people that are not even in the real estate space altogether, right? Like corporate guys that just got a ton of money. And they're like, how do I diversify, right? So it's just having a very candid conversation and just, leading with myself as being, a value resource, and like, how can I help you grow your wealth, right? Because you definitely helped me in that avenue. So those conversations have led to those lending relationships, and then obviously like just network. Really, the network has been the biggest driver. It's just like talking to the right people, being in the right room, building authentic partnerships that where you're leading with value.
And ideally, once you get a handful of lenders that you have vetted or used or developed relationships with and understand their documents and processes and paperwork, you just keep rolling.
You keep rolling with them, right? Yeah, there's not been a lot of churn. I think I'm probably using a good amount of the lenders that I started with, which is a great thing, and that makes the guesswork very minimal. I feel like if you get to the point where you're needing to go to different lenders and all these things, there's probably something that you could probably tweak in your process, like either with yourself or like the deals you're doing, or like, because things happen, your deals go sideways. But I think at the end of the day, if you're communicative and things go wrong or slow, I think that is what gets you through to having those lending relationships that last a long time. So I think that's a big part of it.
What about scale? So you have scaled up your operations, growing portfolio. What sort of like systems or processes, or even like employees, whether you had virtual assistants or in-house employees, like what did scale look like for you, and how did you keep up with the deal flow and demand and organization?
Yeah, so that's still something that I try to tweak to this day. But I would say I started off with virtual assistants. Another shout out to Rich Lennon. When I first started, he had a virtual assistant, he
had like 86 of them.
He had a ton. He had a whole crew, and it's like you try to get in touch with Rich, and it's like you're going to get one of his like 80 VAs. So I was like, man, if this dude is like killing it with VAs like this, like it's like he had VAs to like put toothpaste on his toothbrush. Yeah. So I was like, all right, this is the key, because I'm trying to wear like 50 hats. This is insane. So I started off with several VAs. I had some good and some bad experiences. Definitely learned a lot along the way. But what I learned is like, if you go cheap with a virtual assistant, like you have to understand that the time that you have to spend training them and getting them up to par to what your vision is, it's going to be relative to the cost you're paying, right? So I learned pretty quickly that you can't get the $3-4 VA and not expect to invest the time. What I didn't have at that time was a lot of time, because I was working at W-2.
For sure.
Had a family. So like I needed turnkey people, but I also needed somebody that could learn my process. And I needed to get better at basically documenting my process. So that's what scaling looked like for me. Was I'm literally going to record everything I do. I'm going to write it down, make a process document, and I'm going to share this with this virtual assistant. I got Rich's virtual assistant boot camp course, and I learned some really cool tricks about like how to funnel the right talent into my pipeline. And it seemed kind of cheesy at the time, but it was brilliant. Because Rich is a super smart guy, but it was brilliant because it basically made like a mental obstacle course for the people to follow these set of instructions. And the people that follow those instructions to the last step are the people that you ultimately bring in, right? Cool. So it's like you start with 100 and you end up having like 5 people that even followed, which we consider are basic steps, but they're essential steps. If you're going to do anything like real estate and be involved in a business, there's steps that you got to do methodically. And I think that was scaling for me, was like getting the process to first vet the people that can help me scale, documenting all my processes, and literally just like also just documenting all the like myriad of documentation and paperwork, tax stuff, all this stuff that you have to do at the same time while scaling your business. Because deals weren't a problem for me. Deals flow and all that, and flipping wholesale, I was running and gunning. But what the issue was like catching up with all the like admin that comes around with that, and like keeping up with like, customer follow up and all these things and leads and things. So I had to get better about that. So as I continued to scale, got my first rental and escalated into multiple rentals, I got a property management company to manage my properties for probably the majority of the, just recently started self-managing again. But like that alone, like just offloading, when I got to what I would say was a significant amount of rentals for me, it's like, man, all this tenant communication, keeping up with payments and like taxes, 1099s, this is blowing my mind while I'm working. So like everybody from the outside is like, oh man, you're doing that and that. And I'm like, I'm doing it, but I'm not doing it extremely well and efficiently, right? So scaling looked like just getting organized, like really being honest with myself. And there was definitely some cuts and bruises along the way that led to me being like, enough is enough. We gotta get somebody, we gotta delegate. So I became really good at delegating, basically.
We have about 15 remote team members that work with us. and we've gotten really good at finding good ones. But largely, I learned early on that their success is based on me.
It's based on you.
It's based on how well we have everything documented, how well we relay our culture and our values and our ethics, and like how we want to operate as a team and our vision. And people think you got to change up just because they're remote team members. And you don't.
Nope,
like you just meet with them virtually, but they are full-time team members on your team that can make just as big of an impact. It's been game-changing for us because they're so powerful for what they do for our company, and obviously same with the in-person folks on our team. But if you have the right documentation, the right organization, and then invest that same time into them and make sure they can be successful just as you would an in-person employee, the result are just as strong.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, it's like you get out what you put in.
Right.
And I found that like consistently, like outside of some outliers where it's like, there's some strange things that can happen culturally where it's like they understand we're real estate investors, there's money involved. So you have to be mindful that there is, just like here, there's a possibility that things can be taken advantage of. Like the flexibility of being a remote worker, like tends to lend itself to some behaviors where you're like, am I getting the most value out of this person? So when you invest in them, they see that just like anybody else. And like, I'm going to give you back like, exponentially more because you're invested in me, you believe in me, but you're giving me the tools that I need to succeed to help you out.
Right. So. What's your experience been as a landlord, like working with tenants and things like that?
It's had its moments, I would say. There's definitely been some challenges. What I found was me personally managing versus a company managing. And this is a big plug for Peak Property Management. Get you a good property management like Peak. But I would say it can make or break you. I've had experiences with, what I would say property management companies that were kind of middle of the road where I felt like more could have been done with like the tenant relationship. Yeah. And I've definitely felt the struggles of that. Obviously, not having a ton of experience in different property management companies, you don't really know what you're supposed to do, right? What they're supposed to do, what you're supposed to do, unless you're highly well-versed in like tenant law, landlord law, all these things. So like I found that I had to like educate myself more to understand if I was being shortchanged in certain ways with property management relationships. And there's still some questions that I have, right? But I think ultimately me managing my own properties now, that dynamic shifts when you move from property management to self-management. Right. There's definitely a dynamic of like, hey, this is an individual person, right? I'm probably going to get more leniency, so maybe I can be a little late on my rent, or maybe I don't have to take care of this property as much because they're not going to check on it. So I've had to develop more strong processes, more efficient processes to kind of put up that shield and say, hey, look, we got inspections on this, you're going to get the pay or quit, you know what I mean? It's a partnership, but at the end of the day, we have investments that we have to protect. We have lenders and things like that. So we have to hold you accountable just like you hold us accountable to give you a safe space. So definitely have had to like have a model and have like an actual business in place to protect, our assets.
Did you go straight from like your first rental to hiring a management company, or were you self-managing and then got a few rentals and then hired a manager?
It was the latter. So we were self-managing initially, and then once we got a few doors, it was like, okay, well.
Was that more the time crunch when you were like, all right, let's figure this out? Yeah. Then you figured out your processes and stuff. And you're like, all right, I can bring this back in.
Yeah, kind of both. So initially it was like there wasn't as much of a time crunch because things were going fairly well. But as I was scaling, it was like I need to have somebody that can really take care of these things. Right. And like because I only had 3 or 4, it was like, okay, I got a pretty effective process. They can help me with this. Towards the end, as I was like transitioning from that to bringing it back in house. Mm-hmm. It was more of the scramble, like, okay, we got to really like lock in on our process because now I've gotten, more rentals. Yep. So it was more imperative for me to like have that process where they had, a much better, I guess, process of being a bigger company. Yeah. So I definitely had to kind of prepare myself for that reality once I brought it back in house. And we're still trying to, get that squared away.
Yeah. So. It's very important that a property management company realizes that the residents are a part of the team too.
They are.
Right. And like, I know self-managers feel that they have to because they talk directly to, they don't have to, but if they want to have a decent relationship and decent experience, they're kind of forced to.
You have to, yeah.
But a management company, it's more, I think it's easier to make the excuse of like, we're a business, we're a company, like you're just a tenant and these are our clients.
Right.
Or we have this duty, we have this like kind of put themselves on a pedestal that like we have this duty to our client to, whatever. You got a duty to that tenant too.
That's right.
And again, like if there are a lot of property management companies across the nation that I network with and mastermind with where it's like we're starting to understand that resident experience, if that is elevated, if that is brought to the forefront, the return on investment, meaning like they stay longer, they take better care of the property, they're willing to pay higher rent. There's all these different, they submit less maintenance requests. There's all this data coming in that if we treat the residents like they are a part of our team and we look out for them and support them, it's actually not adverse to the landlord. There's a lot of like kind of OG landlords that are like, well, why are you doing, like, why do you want the resident? You're working for me. And we're kind of like, actually all the data is showing, especially now with the internet and the social media and all this stuff, like if you give that resident a better experience, you're going to be so much better off as a landlord with your return. The literal return, the bottom line is better. So like even if you are ultimately putting some more investment into your property to make that a habitable place for the resident so that they enjoy being there, the return is better and it goes back into your pocket.
It really does.
We have a big push for like trying to set the example for that, preaching that and talking about that and hoping that like we can prove that's the case. And so far we're pretty well advanced in that world and what we're doing and for the resident community and things like that. But the idea is like, if we can get that across, we've already had other management companies in different states reach out to us and be like, how are you doing this? Or how are you doing that? Or how in the world did you make this work or make that work? And we're like, we explain our mindset. It starts with the culture and the mindset of the team. We're like, our team is not going to be sitting around the office talking about tenants. We're not going to be complete. We're going to be understanding that if there is a weird situation going on, that resident is dealing with something that we don't know about, and we just need to figure out what is the solution? How do we work through this, and how do we make sure that everyone wins to the best of our ability, right? And so when you bring that back in-house, like if you hired a manager and didn't necessarily feel that was the case, maybe they weren't treating the residents the way you wanted them to be treated, or they weren't as responsive, or didn't communicate as well as maybe you think they should, you bring that in-house naturally, because then now it's on you to do it, but you can control that experience that they have, and that's really what you're doing when you bring it in-house.
That's right, yeah. And if you can figure out how to like scale that as a self-manager, where it's like, let me put my smiling face and the fact that I care about these tenants across the board, then like you said, like that money goes back in your pocket.
100%.
I've seen the difference between like, hey, I've got 2 or 3 properties and maybe they weren't vetted the best, things change, but they didn't feel like they were heard or their needs were met, and you got $5,000, $10,000, $20 worth of damage, right? Moving in, trying to renovate that thing, put it back on the market, and you got to find a new tenant. Versus like maybe that person was like, you know what, there's a toilet clog, I'm gonna take care of this. I'm not gonna call the landlord for this. I'll keep this from flooding this house because I want to live here. Like I feel safe, I feel heard, taken care of. So like that little mindset can like lead to thousands and thousands of dollars, over hundreds of thousands over time. Just by them feeling like, my needs are met. I'm comfortable here. They're good people.
Just on a short time period, like how expensive it is a month or a couple weeks vacant, and then the turnover cost, and then the new tenant learning the property and establishing that relationship and all that. Like, that relationship, let's say there is a maintenance issue and it's a larger one, right? And it might take you a day or two to get to it, or like to finish it, to get it buttoned up. It's going to inconvenience them for a day or two. They're not going to think you're a piece of crap, like just some slumlord, whatever, because you have this. They're gonna be like, look, Jimmy's a good dude, he takes care of me, this wasn't his fault, where like the opposite is gonna be like, they don't take care of this property, this was their fault, and so it's just a whole different dynamic when you can establish that relationship. And so even though like we're growing as a property management company, about a year ago, we made a commitment to delete the word process in our company and replace it with experience. And so our team, instead of like the move-in process, it's what is our move-in experience? And like it might sound a little corny or cheesy, but it's like our team sees the word move-in experience every day when they work through that, instead of the move-in process. So they're more focused on the feeling, the results, the outcome, versus just like the button that they need to click to make this thing happen.
Like steps are just scary to people. Like I have to do steps to get to what I want. Like experience, I like that. That's great.
So you eventually then moved on to short terms and midterms. I guess that is diversifying the portfolio a little bit and probably having some fun and seeing maybe some higher cash flow and stuff on some. How do you choose when you want to go that route?
Funny enough, the only place that we've really done the majority of our short terms are in Cape Charles, Virginia. Which is a beach town, and that kind of fell into our laps by accident because my wife introduced me to Cape Charles, and we loved the vacation at the beach. Like growing up, I wasn't much of a beach guy, so. When we got in a relationship, she said, hey, let's check out this place. So we've been going there. She'd been going there for like her whole life with her family. So I just saw a lot of potential in the area. I was like, man, people are spending a lot of money out here, right? So like, I didn't know much. I was still kind of young in my real estate mindset. So I wasn't really thinking about short-term rentals or Airbnbs or anything like that. So we just happened to run into a property, a little cottage out there. We were probably going out there for 7 or 8 years before we actually bought a property there. So we ended up finding a really good deal on MLS for a property. This was, we were just like driving by it and was like, man, we should look into that. It was like 75 grand or something on MLS, and I think it was actually listed for like 84 or something. I was using my hyper negotiation skills. I was like, man, this thing's been sitting on the market for a while.
Yeah.
So found out it was an older couple that was moving to Georgia. So we ended up buying it and needed work. We fixed it up together like we would go on the weekends.
Awesome.
Just like we were going anywhere else. So we were saving money on hotels because we were spending probably $300 or $400 for a weekend out there in Cape Charles. But instead, we were spending time as a family. Our kids were young at the time. We were just fixing that thing up over time. And eventually, we were like, all right, we could rent this thing out, right? So like, first couple of years, like it was just like, it was crazy because it was mind blowing how much people were paying to rent there. Yeah. When we finally got it ready, it took us about, I would say, 4 months, just us working on it, like having help. We didn't really hire a big crew. We had some foundation work, but it was mostly us, like just sanding the floors and refinishing them and like putting LVP and stuff. So that ended up just becoming a labor of love. We were able to go to the beach when we were done with our work day. And then also my wife was just like, please as punch, because she was like, man, this is like my dream. I've always wanted a beach house, right? Yeah. So although it wasn't on the water, it was just something that we did as a family, and that's all we thought about at the time. Right. Long story short, it ended up just kind of growing until like, all right, let's put it on Airbnb, see what happens. And like it exploded. I mean, it's been great since then, but like I had got a crazy cheap mortgage. People were just throwing money at this thing and like renting it, and like we were able to keep it rented, and we would spend basically our whole like summer months there, as kind of a icing on the cake.
Right.
And so that ended up, being our first Airbnb that we still do. I think that was like 5 years ago we bought that, but we ended up buying another one that we like renovated, which was a duplex that we still rent now, and we started renting that last year. And it was one of those kind of uncertain things because it was a small space, but it was really close to the water. Mm-hmm. So that was our second Airbnb. So we basically have 3 units that we rent in Cape Charles. And that one just did phenomenal the first year. I mean, it just absolutely went crazy. And I think it was because, for one, there's a premium in like beach towns, and especially in Cape Charles. But for 2, we had 2 units. So like, although they're tiny, it's like basically a single house conversion. Mm-hmm. And like, it's like 600 square feet each side. And like, but it's very cozy, it's comfortable, and it's decorated well. And it just exploded because it's like, wow, like I can be like 3 blocks from the water. Right. And then I got this place that's relatively cheaper compared to like all these huge houses, right? Mm-hmm. So we cater to like these small families, like 2-in-1s that comes for somebody that want to get like the one night. So our niche, I think, for that particular house in town was like, you can come to the beach, you can come experience it, and you don't have to spend a ton of money. Right. And you also have this cute little quaint place and like get in and get out. And our other places, like further out of town, like it's more isolated, it's like country-like, and it works for us, but like people kind of like that too, but they don't have to pay that premium too. So we're very affordable in that standpoint. Yeah. So that was our kind of start in the Airbnb.
That's awesome. Do you manage that?
Yeah, we self-manage.
And you just have a cleaner?
We got a cleaner that's like really awesome and has been with us since the beginning. And we've used like maybe 1 or 2 other cleaners in a pinch when they were not, but because it's a slow town and a small town, like, they work with us and we have a good relationship, and like they're not just the cleaners that just like clean it, like oh, you got a leak over here, I'm gonna fix this, right? Yeah. Or I got somebody that I know, and it's a very close-knit community. So we've been very fortunate to be able to self-manage it and like develop processes that support that.
How does it feel looking at your childhood and how you grew up, and now looking at what you can do for your family and your kids?
It's surreal, Stephen. I mean, I've got a lot of work to do, but like I'm just really proud of like the network that I have. I'm really proud of like my family for like being a part of the journey, and it's not conventional. My wife's childhood was just grossly different from our children's life, and I think that we kind of struggle with trying to keep them humble from the standpoint of not because we're doing extraordinarily well, but because their childhood is so much more blessed. Like I wouldn't say more blessed, but I would say it's more fortuitous to have the access to the things they have now versus what we had. So I'm sure you probably have the same challenge. Like when you work so hard your whole life to bring a vision to reality and you start to see it come to fruition, it's like, how do I expose y'all to this and let y'all know that like this is not the typical? but you deserve it. And, right. But at the same time, it's like what we came from was so different. And like our parents tried, everything they could to give us a good lifestyle, and they did. But it was just different, right? We just didn't have access to the things that you guys have access to. So I would say it feels great. It feels like I have kind of a chip on my shoulder from the working standpoint. Like I don't feel like I have to work, right? The W-2. I do the W-2 because I want to and I enjoy it. I enjoy the work I do. I enjoy the lives I change. But also it feels good to not be a requirement. So if I lose my job tomorrow, I don't feel like our ship's going to come sinking. So I would say from that standpoint, it feels really good. I feel really blessed and thankful to God and to just my family for believing and being a part of that process.
How do you juggle the stress and the workload and the weight of having to perform very well in your W-2 and also all of these real estate projects and your family?
This forced me to become more organized as an individual. I didn't really grow up as a highly structured person because I didn't have a lot of structure in my life kind of coming up. Kind of had a rocky, I would say, childhood transitions. So I had to learn how to become more organized, and I think I had to be more assertive in like my delegation and things like that. So I would say juggling it is definitely like my strength in delegation and understanding processes and being able to make like decisions quickly, my ability to communicate what I need very effectively. So I'll say that's definitely part of it. Faith, prayer, working out, you know what I mean? All these things that kind of, keep the mental psyche as sharp as possible to be able to just get to that next moment and just focusing on like, this is the task at hand. I always tell my wife, she always jokes with me, I'm like, I want to focus on the solution, not the problem. Like we can talk about the problem, but I want to really focus on how can I make a solution for this? So like, I think that mindset, whenever I have like, all right, I got a bunch of things to do, how do I solve this? So like, let's methodically document everything that I've got to do. I've always been a kind of a documenter. I've always been a process guy. All right, this is what I go. These are the steps to fix this. Yeah. And I can't eat the whole elephant, right? Yeah. Right. But I can start chunking down pieces of it. Right. I'm sure you're probably the same way with the structure and all that stuff. And so like just having a process behind everything and like, I can get this done. I may not be able to do it all today. And also being like, it's okay that I got 20 things to do today. I'm only going to tackle 10 of these today. Right. I'm going to do 10 tomorrow. Right. And like a lot of people just want to like, I want to get the whole thing, and they feel like a failure because they didn't do 20 today. But I can do 10 today, and I can feel good about that, prioritize it, and then get the next 10 tomorrow. So. Right.
Yeah. Now I was smiling when you were saying some of that, because sometimes at my most stressed moments and overwhelmed moments, I'm very much not analytical, and I make decisions quickly. But like there are certain times where I feel like I need to be a plumber and unclog whatever's going on in my brain, right? Like I need to fix whatever's happening up here. Simply, it takes me to open a laptop, go to Microsoft Word, and I click the bullet point. And I type out whatever I'm stressed about. And then when you look at that, you realize like, okay, out of the 10 massive things that I typed, I can only actually control like 4 of them, right?
So true.
And then once you look at those, so then you can eliminate the rest, because that is going to resolve itself in time, or you can't control it or whatever. So there's no need to even worry about it. So then you have 4. And then you have 4 and you're like, okay, one of those isn't really even that big of a deal. That's going to be solved tomorrow. So now you have 3. And they're, all right, I have 3 big issues. And now I've unclogged 10 down to 3. And then those 3 I can prioritize, and I can start working on one of the 3 or all 3, or even better, you just take the next step on each 3 towards a resolution. Like put the ball in someone else's court on each of the 3, and then like you're either waiting on someone else or it's working on a resolution or something, and then boom, you can go back and you can look at your kids and play with them instead of just like have that glazed stare for the rest of the day because you didn't unclog your brain.
That's gold, man. That's gold. I mean, that is so true. And I think one of the W-2s that I had like in the past, like it was highly toxic job, very toxic environment, very like mentally draining, very challenging. And I can just remember, working that job, and like you said, I was mentally clogged up because not only was I was like trying to do real estate at the time, but like also like I had this toxic job, and I was like, man, this is killing me. And it was reflecting like when I was communicating with my kids and my wife, and it just like, man, this is not my best self. Like what's in my mind, like and I didn't realize how much like anxiety and stress that I was experiencing, because I think we talked about it a little bit briefly. Is like we don't really talk about like anxiety and stress from things, but like even if you don't like portray it or people don't see it, the stress on the outside, like it makes us do things differently, right? Than we would. Like, and you may not even feel it. You may not even be aware of what it is. But I was very much experiencing the stress that was changing the dynamic at home for me. And I think that was my first like red flag, was like, all right, I'm doing all these things, but I'm doing them off the cuff. Like I'm not really thinking about them. I'm just kind of shooting from the hip on some of this stuff. And that was a stress response for me. And I didn't realize that until later. So as I got better about like understanding what's going on up here, like what I'm thinking about and like what's causing me this discomfort, like I was able to unclog those things. Right. All right, let's figure out what's going on. So one of the bigger unclogger was like, this job is terrible for me. So I ended up leaving that job, and like that unblocked a lot of stuff, right? So I was like, wow, okay. So the job is toxic. Got it. God, you tell me that I don't need to work here anymore. So that took care of itself. But then that began like my path of like evolution to where I really like doubled down on like, all right, these are the steps like you were saying. Like, let me jot down everything on these bullet points. And like the things that you can control, that was major. What you said was like, there's a lot of stuff on this list I can't control.
Right.
So it's almost like if I visually looked at this table and there's like this list right here and I'm striking these things out, like you can instantly feel the relief. Like
100%.
Almost like immediately. And you're like, wow, like I just like solved 50% of my problems just by saying this is going to be delegated. Yeah. This is something I can't control, right? Can't fix it. Why stress it? These things I can focus on and lock in on and knock them off my list. Right. So now you have this shorter list and like you're just mentally more clear and you're able to be, your effective self. So
yeah, I'll tell you, I wasn't planning on going down this tangent, but I think it's a good time to say it. I have this thing called stopping the boat. And everyone on my team knows when I say like, hey, stop the boat, they know exactly what I mean. Yeah. Years ago, I was training to go into the military in a special operations capacity. I did not serve. There's a long story behind that, but I'm not insinuating that I served in any capacity. But I was training, and I was working out with a Navy SEAL, and we would go travel the nation. We would train athletic and corporate teams on teamwork, leadership, and communication. We put them through these hard, challenging physical evolutions and things like that. One of those evolutions was boat races. So we'd have the black inflatable boats, we'd have paddles, and we'd have teams. And we would have, 5, 6 boats out there. If we were training in Richmond, like with a VCU basketball team or something like that, we would do boat races across the James River. James River has a current, right? It has a pretty strong current in this area near Belle Isle. And so we would just imagine like a certain evolution of push-ups and sit-ups and all these different team drills, and you'd pick up the boat and you'd race across, you'd have to tag something, and you would come back in the boat. Now you have 6 people in the boat that's paddling. Usually the sun's not up, it's dark. And there's, a pretty strong current depending on the water level and stuff like that. You're wet, you're sandy, you're in this kind of confusing environment. It's a race. You don't want to lose the race. Yeah. Typically every boat has a leader. Once the boats hit the water, no one there is a professional, like whatever, rower or whatever, right? Like no one has like the great experience of getting a boat across a river back, as fast as they can. So the point of it is it's imperative to work as a team and to communicate well and row on the same cadence, and then you can go in a straight line. When you get off cadence or things are too chaotic or everything's just going crazy, the boats will zigzag and often go in circles, right? And this current is taking you downstream away from your objective, because your objective is over here, and you got to touch that. You can't just go, and so what would happen is all this chaos would go. You're in the middle of the river. Everyone's panicking. Some people are terrified of water. Some people don't know how to swim. And so your boat's going in circles. The best thing the leader can do is there's a sign, there are signs that the leader would say like left rudder, right rudder, and you're steering the ship and stuff like that. Sometimes both rudders are doing it at the same time. They stop. Sometimes you say left rudder, right rudder goes, and it's just chaos, right? It's chaotic. And so, but there is a sign, and one of the signs is just all stop. And you hold up your fist and you say all stop. Everyone's supposed to stop and put their hand on their paddle, and everyone just stops and looks at the leader. Wow. And so when that happens, you're in the middle of a race. You have the current taking you away from your objective, and it's one of the most important things you can do. So once you're spinning in circles, you're going zigzag. The leader that can say all stop and get his team together will win every time. Wow. And so the leader says all stop. The leader says, hey, look, we have left rudder and we have right rudder. All right, we're not working together as a team. When I'm saying right rudder, left rudder is going, all right, do you understand that you're left rudder? Yes. Do you understand you're right rudder? Yes. Do you understand what to do and how to call? All right, guys, team, there's a cadence. It's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So say it with me now, guys. And we're still going downstream at this point. Like we're not actually doing anything, right? But the leader's just calm, and the leader is saying 1. Now say it with me. 1, 2. So the whole team
Everybody
gets on this
syncs up.
cadence, and we
Yep.
say, all right, let's practice left rudder. And we're going downstream, right? We're
Yeah.
getting closer to the rapids. Left rudder, right rudder. And then everyone's on the same page.
Awesome.
And then we say, all right, let's go. And then we say,
powerful.
1, 2. And then that boat will go in a straight
Go in a
line
straight
exactly to every other boat is sitting there going crazy,
Yeah.
zigzagging, everything. And once I learned that, I quite literally in my time of training never lost a race. Now there were other SEALs that would come out and train with us, and they would be very competitive as well. The Navy SEAL knew that I was experienced in this. And they knew like what kind of like that I had figured that out. And so they would say, all right, Stephen, go with, all the captains and the seniors of this team. And of course, they're the most fit, they're the most experienced, they're the strongest, and we would crush. We would win the evolution. And then we'd come back and, they'd be all ego driven and everything. And we'd be like, all right, yeah, celebrate. And he'd be like, all right, Steven, now go with the coaches.
Right.
And the coaches are 50, 60 years old, past their prime.
Yep.
And we'd win.
Still win.
We would win every time.
That's awesome.
And the thing is because we knew that goes in a bunch of other lessons like no bad teams, only bad leaders, like things like that. But this was a lesson to me. What I carried with me was you got to know when to stop the boat.
Yep.
And so in business, in life, there's these times where you have to know, you have to think, man, I'm so busy. There's so much going on.
That's it.
I have this mental clog. There's all these things. I'm feeling the anxiety, the stress, my family's doing this, the business is doing this. Is the best thing you can do when you feel like you need to work harder and go faster and just push against everything is just stop the boat.
Wow.
And you stop the boat, you unclog your brain, you figure out what direction you need to go, and then you just start going that direction.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
So when my maintenance team is like, we got all these fires and everything, I'm like, hey, stop the boat.
Right.
Like there's chaos, there's people who don't know what's going on. We're messing up the process. There's different, stop the boat and let's pull everyone out of the field. When we have more work orders than ever, let's pull everyone out of the field and redirect and reassign and make sure we're following our processes, we're following our values, our culture. Everyone's got the support and resources they need. And then we go back out in the field and boom. Everything is unclogged, everything's working. And same with the management team, the finance team, the sales team, the marketing team, like that's how we operate. So my team often, like the leaders will be like, I just got to stop the boat today.
Right.
They'll call other people in, we'll stop the boat, fix anything, and then go back out and get the job done.
Dude, that's incredible.
But
that's such an incredible lesson. And it's crazy that it applies to so much.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? So like that's how you run a business. Like get those foundations.
It's crazy how much that kind of training like directly correlates to leadership in business as well.
100%.
Which if anyone who's ever heard of Jocko Willink, that's all he talks about,
yeah.
all of his books, all of his podcasts. Like it's that sort of training, that sort of experience that brings it over directly into business leadership and operations.
True. That's so true.
So what's next for you, man? Like what's in the next 3-5 years for you?
Yeah, I would say 3 to 5 years. We're definitely looking to, I say, get into more of the new construction, maybe development, maybe commercial space. That's kind of always been kind of the next wave for us. Rentals are great. They're not get rich, type of opportunities. We definitely want to get to more like how do we get to like better quality corporate tenants in more just higher ROI investments, right? Where we can take the money that we've made from these investments, put them into something else that's just a higher ROI vehicle. So we're looking into that. We're looking into more vacation spots. Maybe mountains. We've always done beach stuff, so we're like, we gotta do something different.
Yeah.
We like going to the mountains, and that's how our affinity for the beach stuff. So we like going to the beach. So it's easy for us. I know you're a beach guy too, so it's like if we can make money and spend less money, then that's a win for us. So better short-term rentals, mid-term rentals. Maybe we don't have any mid-terms right now. We're just looking for the right opportunities, really. So I think that's it. New construction, maybe some development, but we stopped the boat a little bit. We're stepping back a little bit. We're looking at some opportunities to sell some rentals and things like that, and redeploy some capital into other avenues. So
awesome.
Stopping the boat right now, taking a look at everything, looking at our processes, and then we're going to just see what the next step is.
What advice would you give for someone who's brand new getting in the game? What's the first step they should take?
Yeah, first step is I would say build a good network. Expose yourself to as many people that that you feel like you could add value to as possible. Like just get in the right room, be intentional with your time and like learning about things, and just take your time, take baby steps into it. Don't just go out there and say, hey, look, I'm a subject matter expert in all this. I'm like a big time wholesaler. Just see how you can help people. Ask those questions and then just put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to just mingle and just learn and be a fly on the wall. And then, take action once you got the right foundation, let's say.
Awesome. Where can people find you?
So you can find me on Facebook, Jimmie Darden. You can also find me, we have tribehomebuyers.com. Facebook, we're Tribe Home Buyers. That's TRIBE, like a native tribe or people tribe. That's where we are mostly, is Tribe Home Buyers, or Facebook Tribe Home Buyers.
Awesome. Sweet. Any final thoughts?
Just stay the course. I would say we're kind of doing that. We're just reevaluating everything. We're building intentional relationships. But if you're out there in real estate, you're trying to get started, I would say just, feel free to reach out to me if you need help. People like myself or Steven. But yeah, stay the course. Learn a lot, learn often. Just be a student of life. Just keep working hard.
I'm so thankful for you coming on the podcast, man. It's great hearing your story, learning more about you. You're leading by example for sure on how to do things the right way. The network and community that you've built around yourself, like the people you keep company with, just outstanding guy. Thanks for coming on the podcast and helping us learn. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure, man. And thank you so much for having me, man. Your platform is awesome. We always appreciate you, man. So thank you for everything you do.